My name is Trent Nessler, and I am president of Rebound Vitality, our innovative wellness program. I am also the founder and co-developer of the ViPerform AMI. The ViPerform AMI is a biomechanical assessment using 3D wearable sensor technology. This allows us to accurately assess your movement and identify movement patterns that put you at risk for a musculoskeletal injury. From this information, we will provide you an individualized exercise program provided via our app, My Rebound app. This program will take you through an exercise program to address those deficits that are identified and which puts you at risk for injury, and will also improve your athletic performance. So let's take a look at ViPerform AMI. For the first part of the assessment, and the most important part of the assessment, is placement of the sensor clips. This is done in a very standardized way for every single subject that we do. The first part of this is we are going to place the tibial ruler on the subject's leg at the inferior medial mal, and then what we're going to do is go up to, on the ruler, what the individual's height marker is at. We place a mark there. We extend that mark across the tibia so that we can see that on both sides of the tibia. Then what we're going to do is we're going to repeat this process on the opposite leg. Again, the ruler is placed at the inferior edge of the medial mal, and then what we do is we go up to the subject's height on the ruler, we make a mark, and then we're going to extend that across their tibia. This allows us to have a very standardized way at which we place the tibial sensors. The next part that we're going to do is we're going to place the sensor clips on.
Your left hand.
So what we do is the prongs of the sensor clip must go to the subject's left side. If you place this incorrectly, then what ends up happening is that the sensor is placed upside down, and this will invert all of your data. If you don't capture this early, it will mean that you will have to perform the assessment over again. So again, the prongs go to the subject's left side. You'll see as it was demonstrated there. The next part we're going to do is we're going to place our thoracic and lumbar sensors. The first thing that we do is we palpate for the PSIS. We're going to make a mark on each of those locations. So we're going to mark PSIS on the left side and on the right side. Once we have those marks, we're going to extend a line across both of those. This is the line where the sensor will be placed. The center of the sensor, or the center of the prongs, should be centered with the subject's spine. This makes sure that you get it directly in the center. The sensor clip is going to end up right on that line that you just drew. Then you're going to take your lumbar template, as shown here. It is designed, or it is marked based on the subject's height. You're going to place that on the very first sensor clip, and then what you're going to do is you're going to place the second sensor up on the template where it shows. It's going to look like it's upside down, but this is exactly how it's supposed to be set. Again, the prongs are centered with the center of the subject's spine. That is placement of both the lumbar and thoracic sensor clip. Now, if we go to the computer, what you're going to see is that the sensors are being calibrated. This calibration process takes a few minutes. What it's doing is it's downloading the algorithms from the computer to the individual sensors. Now what you see is that the computer is actually going to walk you through that same process. So if you forget how you're supposed to place your sensor clips, the computer will actually walk you through this entire process that we just performed. Again, placing the tibial ruler on the tibia, marking at the subject's height, extending that line across to their tibia, and making a mark. Palpating the PSIS, putting a mark on each one of those, extending that line across, and that's where the first sensor glows. Now what you see is the system is telling you that your sensors are ready to go. As you remove the sensors from the docking station, you see that the computer recognizes that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to place them on the subject. As we place these on the subject, you can see that the sensors are looking upright. What you should see is both sensors say dorsivy in the proper position. So once the sensor clips are placed, the next thing that we're going to do is a calibration for your posture. So the subject standing facing straight ahead, arms by your side, take a deep breath and go ahead and perform the calibration. This will provide a calibration for the subject's posture. Next thing that we do is we press the next button, it moves us directly into the testing position. The first test that we will perform is the plank. Now keep in mind with both the planks and the side planks, it is essential that you have a good starting position prior to performing the test. If you do not have the subject in a good position, you're simply testing their ability to perform a bad test. The subject must get into the position prior to you starting the test. The test position, the shoulders are at 90 degrees, the elbows are at 90 degrees. You have a neutral spine and neutral hip position. Your feet are all the way together. The gaze is a downward gaze. Looking up would cause the sensors to sense that upward motion of the cervical spine, and it would be recorded. What we're assessing here is the ability to hold this plank position. Hold the plank position in both flexion and extension and rotation. At the top of your screen, you see a timer counting down the time to the 60-second mark. This is a time test. You do not have to press the space bar until this test is completed. Once the test is completed, it will self-stop. There's also a pain scale at the top that goes from 0 to 10. The subject can be marked from 0 to 10 if they report pain. The next test we're going to perform is a squat test. We have the subject stand up and face away from the camera. Now you're going to notice on the computer screen we have a camera. Typically this is pointed towards the subject. For today's purposes, we are not doing that, we're doing this filming. The subject always faces away from the computer when performing this test. That allows us to see their hip position and if they have a lateral shift during performance of this test. So in this particular instance, we saw the subject go too low. So what we're doing is we gave him some guidance on what his position should be. We don't want him to go below 90 degrees. What you're going to see on the side of your computer where it says squat, there's a description of what this test and how it should be performed. It is very important that we are not describing this test to the subject. If I tell him to squat with his feet shoulder width apart, chest up, only to 90 degrees, what I'm going to get is what I just described. What we want to capture is what is the subject's natural motion. In an ideal situation, you perform a squat for the subject and you have them repeat that motion for you. This helps us to capture what is their natural motion. At the top of your screen, you also see a countdown of the number of reps that he has performed versus the number of reps that need to be performed. The squat test is done for 20 reps. We attempt to do 20 repetitions to bring in some form of fatigue. During the performance of the squat test, we are not only capturing how much lumbar flexion and extension he gets, but also how much of a lateral shift. If there was a plumb line from his cervical spine to his sacrum, and he performs a squat, we would want his hips to remain relatively equal distance from that plumb line. Shifting your hips to one side or the other can indicate a lateral shift. We measure this with every single rep. It is normal for people to move within 4 to 8 degrees right to left. What is not normal is to only shift to one side or to shift greater than 10 degrees. Also at the top of your screen, you see a loss of balance and a loss of pelvic control that appears with every single rep, which you can mark if you see those things appear. The next thing that we're going to do is a right side plank. Right side is always performed before the left side. position here is your ankles are in line with your knees, in line with your hips, in line with your shoulders. There is no rotation of the shoulders, and the hand is up on the hips. This position has a high EMG activity for the glute medius. So we are not only testing the stability or the endurance of the glute medius, but also your core to stabilize in lateral side bending and in rotation. At the same time, we want to look down at the subject's shins. We are looking for what is called tibial drop. Tibial drop is an indication of someone who's at risk for ankle injuries. A tibial drop is simply the ankle's inability to stay in a neutral ankle position and not drop down to the floor. We've seen this highly associated with chronic ankle sprains in basketball players. This is an endurance test. This is performed for 60 seconds. If you look at your screen and the subject is unable to perform this test for 60 seconds, you simply click the failed box and press the space bar. This will stop the test and score the subject only up to the point where they were able to hold. As soon as this test stops, it will start to move you into the next test. The next test is the left side plank. Again, we do it in the sequence so that we start to build some level of fatigue for the glute medius. Again, we want the subject with his feet on top of each other. His ankles are in line with his knees, in line with his hips, in line with his shoulders. He's going to maintain this motion for a set period of time, 60 seconds. At the top of your screen, you see a scale from 0 to 10. That is a pain scale. If someone is having pain, you can simply mark what that level of pain was during the course of this test. Over on the opposite side of your screen, you see a big green dot. That big green dot indicates what particular test you are performing at that time. It will also tell you what test is coming up for the next one. The plank test, the side plank test, and the ankle lunge test are all timed tests. You simply press the space bar to start the test, and the timer will run it out and stop the test. There is no need to continue to press the space bar for the performance of this test. Again, this test is performed for 60 seconds. At the conclusion of this test, the computer will tell you the next step. We are simply removing the sensor clips from the thoracic and lumbar spine, and we are going to take the sensors and place them on the tibial, right and left tibia. All of the remaining tests are going to be single limb tests. We will perform first on the right side and then on the left side. It is critical, the sensors are labeled right and left. It is critical that you put the right sensor on the right leg and the left sensor on the left leg. If you do this incorrectly, again, you will have to perform the test over again. This will invert data and prevent from capturing of good data. Now, the first test that we're doing is a single leg squat. During the single leg squat, one of the most important things is the squat is performed in the athletic position. This is not a pistol squat. We put them in an athletic position where the opposite hip is an extension or slight extension with the knee flexed. This mimics a running type of motion. And what this allows us to do is really dial in to their glute medius as well as their ability for their core to stabilize their pelvis. During the performance of this test, you will see a loss of balance and a loss of pelvic control square appear at the top of your screen. If you see them drop their pelvis or have a lot of movement at their pelvis, you can simply mark loss of pelvic control. If they touch their opposite foot to the ground at any time during the performance of this test, that is recorded as a loss of balance. We've seen high record or high number of loss of balance associated with an increased risk for injury. The next test that we're going to perform is a single leg hop. The individual is going to perform a single leg explosive hop as high as they can. The idea is for them to perform this explosive activity while controlling their motion. Again, what we're not recording is their ability to jump as high as they can, but how do they land, and can they control themselves when they land? What does their knee look like? What does their hips look like? During the performance of this test, we are capturing the depth of their motion. We are also capturing their ability to control their knee in the frontal plane. Simply, does their knee go in or does it go out? In, valgus, is a bad position. Out, varus, is also a bad position. The larger that motion is, the greater risk there is. At the same time, what we also capture is that when your knee falls in towards midline, valgus, is what speed does that occur at? We know that if your knee falls in at a slow, controlled rate, that's much less harmful than if it falls in at a high rate of speed. The next test that we're going to perform is a single leg hop plant. Again, what we are attempting to record is the ability to jump through multiple directions and control that frontal plane motion. Sorry. So the first motion they're going to perform is jumping forward. Then they're going to jump back, and then they're going to jump out, and then they're going to jump in. Again, what we are attempting to do is to capture what is the depth of their motion, what is their frontal plane control, and what is the speed at which that control occurs. Addition, one of the things that we see is that when they jump in towards midline or medial, that is one of the most difficult motions to control. In that motion, the subject has to take their center of mass, drive it towards the medial direction, stop their center of mass once they plant, and control their knee all at the same time. We find this to be one of the most telling motions, and we tend to see higher degrees of valgus occur during that motion. This particular sequence is only performed twice for a total of 8 reps. The next test that we're going to perform is the ankle lunge test. Sorry, hopefully you can cut that out. During the ankle lunge test, we are testing the range of motion of not only the ankle, but the knee and the hip. The idea is for the subject to be in a neutral position, both neutral knee and neutral ankle. That means they start at 90 degrees at the ankle, 90 degrees at the knee. Then they will lunge forward as far as they can without raising their heel off of the floor. What this is going to do is it's going to give a good range of motion for how much motion they have in dorsiflexion. At the same time, what it's going to allow us to see is there a difference between their right and their left side? The other thing that we do not want is we do not want the subject to place their hands on their knee and to push down on their knee or to bounce during this particular motion. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to now start performing all of those same tests on the left side. The first one being the single leg squat. Again, what we're going to do is they're going to perform 10 single leg squats. As he performs these 10 single leg squats, we're doing the same thing. We want him in the athletic position. We're assessing the depth of the motion. We're assessing his ability to control frontal plane motion, both varus to valgus, and control his pelvis. We're also recording if he has any loss of balance during the performance of this test. Again, you notice the boxes appear at the top of the screen with every single rep. This lets us know, or you can record your loss of balance and loss of pelvic control. Again, we also see the recording and the number of reps that have been performed. The single leg squat is performed for 10 reps. The next motion that we're moving into is a single leg hop. Again, performing the single leg hop on his left side. By performing this on both the right side and the left side, what this allows us to do is to record what is called limb symmetry index. Limb symmetry index is simply a measure of motion or degrees of motion or speed of control for your right side and your left side. We know that as little as a 10% difference between your right side and your left side puts you at greater risk for injury. Traditionally, this has been done by simply measuring single limb performance of a test, like a hop. What is not traditionally done is looked at the biomechanics during the performance of those hops. One of the main differences with this test is that when we measure limb symmetry index, we measure how do you compare right side to left side related to biomechanics, meaning looking at your ability to not only perform the test, but also can you control your frontal plane motion and what is the depth of that motion that occurs. Again, the next test that he's going to perform is the hop plant. He's going to jump forwards, backwards, lateral, and medial. It is important if you're performing this test that you do it in this exact sequence: forwards, backwards, lateral, and medial. One of the beauties of this system is that we have collected data on over 27,000 people. Each individual assessment collects 1,500 data points. What this allows us to do from a research standpoint is blind this data and then start to analyze some normative values for sport, for age, for position, or for firefighters and police officers. So remaining and making sure that you do this exact sequence is very important for our data capture. The final motion is the ankle lunge test. At the conclusion of the ankle lunge test, our subject will have performed 3 one-minute time tests and 83 reps. This is very important to know. This is a physical exam. It is not designed to be easy. It is designed to see how do you move when you're tired. We don't want to see in simply 3 reps, how do you move? We want to see how do you move when it really matters. When fatigue starts to set in, are you able to control those motions that we know put you at risk for injury? The beauty of the score, the beauty of this results, the beauty of this information that is gained can help you drive better corrective exercises to truly have an impact on human movement. Okay, so the first step of the AMI is to place our sensor clips. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to measure at the inferior medial mal, and we're going to use our tibial sensor measurement device, and we're going to go up to the subject's height, and we're going to make a mark directly on their tibia. We're going to extend that line across their tibia so we can see the whole way across. And then we're going to repeat that same process on the opposite side. This keeps this very standardized, and it's all based off of the subject's height. That way, if this is done precisely, then your sensor clips are always going to end up on the same side. Now, when placing on the sensor clips, what you're going to do is you're going to place the prongs of the clip to the subject's left-hand side. So you'll notice we had her raise her left hand so that we know what side we're putting that on. So now the prongs are both faced to the left side. That's a very important step right there, because if you do that incorrectly, the sensor will end up upside down, which will invert all of your data. This will cause you to have to repeat the test. The second part is placing the lumbar and the thoracic sensors. First, you're going to palpate PSIS on both sides. Once you have those, you're going to place a point on each side. You're going to use your lumbar measure and draw a line straight across connecting those two. That is the point where you place your first sensor. The prongs should be centered with the center of the spine. And the top of the DAP should be right at that baseline. Then we're going to take our template, again, based on the subject's height. We're going to place this directly on this top of the sensor clip. This will show you exactly where to place the next sensor. Now, this one's going to look like it's upside down, which it is, but when the sensor clips in there, you will see it is placed upright. Now, for athletes, like your CrossFit athletes who have a very prominent spinal extensors, you're going to notice that there's a big gap in the middle, and that's okay. We have them bend a little bit forward and press on that to get nice and secure. The next thing we can do is we go to the computer. And on the computer, what the computer is now doing is it's downloading all of the data from the computer to the sensors. This way, the sensors know what data we should actually capture. Now, if you forget what this measurement process is, while the computer is downloading the algorithms, it will actually walk you through, step by step, exactly how to place these sensors. So this process takes a little bit. You can always see that it's sensing that data. The circular motion is telling you that that is still downloading the actual algorithms. And again, this is a nice refresher because if you do forget a step, it always points it out on the computer for you. Again, this takes a little bit, and it depends on the size of the subject pool that you have and how long it takes to actually download this data. It's important to make sure that when you're doing this, that both the computer are plugged in as well as your sensors. If your sensors are not plugged in, what you're going to do is you're going to get a false reading. And what the system will tell you is that it was not able to sync to the sensors. What this simply means is that you have to start the process over and make sure that the sensors are actually plugged in. This is an example of the error screen. So what it's going to do at this point is it's going to walk you through the process again to make sure that the sensor numbers on there are the proper ones. At this point, you now see that the sensors have synced. It's telling you to go ahead and remove the sensors. As soon as you remove the sensors, you'll see on the computer that it senses that those have been removed. Now what we're going to do is we're going to place the sensors on the subject. One sensor says upper, the other one says lower. The upper goes on the thoracic spine, the lower goes on the lumbar spine. You know you have these placed correctly if you look at the sensors and it says dorsa V in an upright position. If either one of those are upside down, you know that you have the sensors placed incorrectly. At this point, we're having the subject stand with their arms by their side, completely relaxed. What the system has done is calibrate for what their posture is. As soon as we press next, we now go into our testing screen. The first test we're going to perform is the plank test. The plank test, what we want is the shoulders and the elbows are at 90 degrees. The lumbar spine and the hips are at a neutral position. The feet are all the way together. The gaze is a downward gaze.
When you are ready, get into position.
Now, before you start the test, you have to have the subject into the position. Once they get into the position, you press the space bar, and this will start the test. And what you see on your screen is it's recording the data. You have your open picture window recording the data. Then what you have up at the top of the screen are a bunch of dots. What you have is the little red dots that go from 0 to 10. If our subject is reporting pain at any time during this, you simply click one of those dots and it will record that pain rating. Also, at the very top you see failed. That is a box that is only checked if the subject cannot hold this test for 60 seconds. You simply click that box failed and you press the space bar and this will stop the test. Also up in the corner you see a timer that is counting down the time, shows you how much time is remaining. This is a time test, so you do not have to press the space bar to finish the test. The next test is the plank test, or squat test. I gotta say that over again.
Sorry,
Yes.
time out. I need to fix something real quick. You're doing great. It's nothing on you.
Just hold that position for 7 more minutes.
No. Is there any way to fix this
She
right
can
now,
do it.
Trent? No, I couldn't.
Not now.
Okay, cool.
Don't worry about it though,
Okay.
because what I'll tell, raise it up a little bit. And I'm gonna say for our demonstration today,
Okay.
to record this, we are not recording the subject, but
Okay.
in normal situations, there would be a video of the subject there.
Okay. Perfect. I realized it as soon as you
Yeah.
started tasking.
Yeah, that's all right.
Sorry. No, you're doing great. You've done nothing wrong.
So if you can cut that part where I said the next test, because I said the wrong one.
Okay. We're
You're
ready for the next.
Ready?
So
You're gonna
she's
stand
standing
up.
up.
Yep. So the next test that we're gonna be performing is a squat test.
So you're
In
gonna
this one, we're gonna have the subject face away from the camera.
like this.
As they're facing away from the camera, we're simply gonna have them perform a squat.
Down. Squat right back up.
Now, it's really important with the instruction on the EMI that you not verbally tell the patient how to squat. You do not tell them feet shoulder width apart, chest up, squat down to 90 degrees. What we want to do is demonstrate a squat and have them perform the squat. The reason that we do this is this allows us to capture what their natural motion is. Now, on every single rep that we perform, you have to press the space bar.
Ready?
The space bar allows the window to capture exactly that motion. So you'll notice every time the space bar is pressed, there's a little window that opens up and it's capturing that data. Up at the top of the screen again,
Squat.
you have a recording of the number of reps that are being performed. This particular test is 20 reps. We do this in order to create some level of fatigue in our subject. You'll also notice that as we perform the test, two boxes appear at the top. One is loss of balance, the other one is loss of pelvic control. If you see the subject lose balance during the performance of this test, you would simply click that during the performance of that individual rep.
Squat.
Again, there's also a pain scale, 0 to 10. If someone is reporting knee pain, back pain, ankle pain during the performance of this test, you can simply mark that on a 0 to 10 scale.
Squat.
If you look on the other side of your screen where it says squat, you'll see a big green dot. That indicates what current test is being performed.
Squat.
There's also some verbal description in there that is not meant to be the verbal instruction that you give the patient, rather how you demonstrate the position to the athlete. Again, what we are trying to capture here is their natural motion.
Squat.
Finally, at the bottom of the screen, for today's purposes, you will not see the subject recorded in this video. But normally, the camera is directly behind the subject, and this video is also recording that data.
Up on your right elbow, your feet need to go on
Now, the next test that we're going to is a right side plank. You always perform this on right side first, and then the left side. The position is your ankles are in line with your knees, in line with your hips, in line with your shoulders. The hand is up on the hip, and your head is in a neutral position. The reason that we do this is we want to make sure that the ankles and the knees, the hips, and the shoulders are all in a line to be in the correct posture. They're going to hold this for a 1 minute period of time. And what we're doing, again, they have to be in the position, we press the space bar, and we start recording. What we're simply looking to do is to see how long can they tolerate this position. This particular test has the highest EMG activity for the glute medius. So at the same time as recording their stability during this test, we're also fatiguing out their glute medius for all of the single leg activities that will be performed after this. Again, up in the corner, you see the failed as well as the time, how much time is remaining. And again, you can hit failed spacebar if they're unable to perform the test. Finally, look down at the tibia. One of the things that we're looking for here is what is called a tibial drop. One of the things that we see in a side plank is that athletes who have a tibial drop or their tibia drops down to the ground, we often see this associated with ankle sprains.
Okay, now we're gonna shift around and you're
Now that she's done this on the right side, we're going to repeat this test on the left side. Again, what this is doing is we're testing the stability. We're testing not only pelvic stability, but core stability. We want to see, can you maintain this position in both side bending as well as rotation? Studies show that the inability to do this not only sets you up for low back pain, but it also sets you up for a lower extremity injury. Again, stability of the core is a vital position. Again, if you look over to the side of the screen, you see the big green dot. This is again indicating what particular test that we are on. And it is recording on that test. Keep in mind, the verbiage that is there is not the verbiage that you tell the subject. It is the demonstration that you perform so that they repeat that using their natural position. The plank test and the side plank test, it's absolutely critical that you get them in the proper position before starting the test. If you don't do this, you're simply recording their ability to perform a bad movement. We want to see their ability to perform a good movement. Now, what the system is doing is it's guiding us to go ahead and move those sensors from the thoracic and the lumbar spine, and then we're going to put them on the tibia. This is where the sensors will remain for the remainder of the test. It is very important that you put the right sensor on the right leg and the left sensor on the left leg. Again, if you do not do this, you will have to repeat the test. You can't correct this data if it is captured incorrectly. So the first things that we're going to do are all right-sided tests. The first test that we're going to do is a single leg squat. So what we're going to do is she's going to do a single leg squat in what we call the athletic position. She's going to extend her back leg backwards, not a pistol squat. We are not doing a pistol squat in this position. By having her leg back behind her, what this allows us to do is not only see what does she look like in an athletic position, but also really dial into her glute medius during this activity. The other thing with this particular test is we do not want her to touch her opposite foot at any time. This test not only tests your ability or your glute medius strength and endurance, but also your ability to control your knee in what we call the frontal plane. So we're not only just assessing your ability to perform the task, but what do you look like when you perform this task? It is also recording the depth of your squat as well as how much valgus occurs at your knee. If your knee does fall into valgus, it's also recording the speed at which that valgus occurs. This test is performed for 10 reps. In addition to looking at frontal plane motion, we're also looking to see, can she control her pelvis during the performance of this particular test? The next step is we're doing the single leg hop. The single leg hop is simply taking this movement to the next step. Now we want to see how she moves during an explosive types of movement.
I'll say hop, you hop, hold, stick it, and then I'll say hop again.
Again, during the performance of this test, she's going to keep her opposite foot up the whole time. The idea is to see how can she control her frontal plane motion as well as her pelvis during the entire function. Again, with every single rep, what we are recording is not only her frontal plane control, but if she has a valgus, what speed does that valgus occur at? We're also recording the depth of that particular motion. One of the other things that we're looking for is any loss of pelvic control as well as a loss of balance. In the instance of all the single limb tests, loss of balance is only recorded if they touch their opposite foot to the ground or if they touch some form of external device to support themselves, like placing their hand on a wall, etc. Otherwise, what you're recording is what you see. Sometimes a loss of pelvic control will result in a loss of balance.
So we're gonna move to a single leg hop plank, swing, and then
The next test that we're going to perform is the single leg hop plant.
backwards.
In this particular test, what she's going to do is she's going to hop forward, she's going to hop backwards, she's going to hop out, and she's going to hop in.
It's not to see how,
What this allows us to do,
it's just to see that you can control going in different directions.
what this allows us to do is actually record how her control is during a multi-directional hop. Some of the most important motions that we're looking for, forwards and backwards, is very important. But then what we're also recording is her ability to move lateral and medial. What we find is that medial is actually one of the more difficult motions to do. During the medial hop, the subject has to move their center of gravity, center of mass, medial, jump, land, control that medial progression of their center of mass, all while controlling their knee at the same time. Again, this cycle is only performed twice for a total of 8 reps. The same data is captured on this as all the other single leg tests. The final movement that we're going to do is the ankle lunge test. The ankle lunge test is a great test for assessing not only ankle mobility, but knee mobility as well as hip mobility. This is a really good test for ankle dorsiflexion. So what we want to make sure,
You can rest it or that, whatever you prefer.
what we want to make sure is that the subject is in a neutral position. What that means is that they're at 90 degrees at their ankle and 90 degrees at their knee. When they move forward, it's very important that their arms and their hands are not pushing on their knee. They're also not bouncing into the position. They're simply holding that position as far as they can.
Relax back to you.
If their heel comes off the floor, they must bring it back slightly. What we're trying to determine here is how much mobility do you have in your ankle. Studies show that as little as a 10% difference between your right and your left results in a 10% increase for an ankle injury.
Lunge.
We've also seen that folks who have a limitation in their ankle range of motion also tend to have a lateral shift when performing the squatting motion.
And relax.
Now that we've completed all of the tests on the right side,
Single leg squat.
we're simply going to repeat the sequence on the left side.
Leg up. Make sure it goes behind you.
Again, we are starting with the single leg squat. With the single leg squat, she's simply performing 10 reps.
Squat.
Again, during the single leg squat, the sensor is capturing what is the depth of the motion of the squat. It is also capturing how much frontal plane motion occurs at her knee. Does her knee move out towards a varus position and in towards a valgus position?
Squat.
If she does move into a valgus position, at what speed does she move into that valgus position at? For a single leg squat, valgus speed should be less than 20 degrees per second. Again, what this allows us to do is start putting some numbers to what speeds should be associated with what motion.
Squat.
And if people lie without or outside of that barrier, it also gives an indication
Squat.
of what type of risk exists.
Relax.
Now the next test we're going to do is the single leg hop.
Just straight up and down.
Again, it's very important with all of these motions that they are not in a pistol squat position.
Try and keep it down.
So what she's going to do is, again, standing on one leg,
Your ability to maintain control.
she's going to jump up into the air, giving an explosive hop. As she lands, the recording of the valgus is recorded at land. The speed of valgus is also recorded at land. For our experienced users, you can actually go into your system and look and see what the speed is at both load, as she starts to take off, and at land. But what we know from capturing all of the data that we have is that load speeds tend to be much higher, and these are the ones that are associated with risk. For a single leg hop, your speed should be 100 degrees per second or less. Anything over that starts to indicate some form of a risk. The other reason that we're performing left and right tests is to look for limb symmetry index. How does your right compare to your left?
Now we need single leg hop in, so forward, back, out, and
The final single leg test is the hop plant. She's going to jump forwards, she's going to jump backwards, then lateral, and then medial. And again, what we're doing is we're measuring that frontal plane control during all three of these motions. And again, one of the other things that we're doing is trying to compare right side to left side. That limb symmetry index is a key indicator whether someone's at risk or not. We also know in traditional tests, limb symmetry index is typically measured on your ability to perform the test. For this test, limb symmetry index is based on your frontal plane control and the speed at which that motion occurs. Our limb symmetry index is based on biomechanical factors and not simply the ability to perform the test.
relax. Now we need
Now, the final motion of the test is the ankle lunge test. So she has now completed the entire exam. Once she completes this 3 reps, she will have completed 3 1-minute time tests in 83 reps. That allows us, with a very high degree of specificity, to see where her limitations are. Clinically, this allows us to provide a very guided exercise intervention to help correct these movement deficits. Because what we know is that when you correct these movement deficits, you not only reduce the risk for musculoskeletal injury, but you also improve athletic performance. For our first responders, this means you run up a flight of stairs faster and you reduce your risk for injury. This completes the ViPerform AMI.
Trent, thank you so much for doing this test. In the fire service, I know our members are put to the test so often with different types of training, different types of testing through the years, and it gets sometimes fatiguing to say, why would we want to do something like this?
You know, I think first and foremost is kind of the technology and the science that we're applying. We are using a wearable sensor technology that captures human movement within 3% of lab quality data. So I think that's the first thing. You know, in traditionally we've used so many of these tests, screens, whatever, right? That go by the human eyeball, go by our interpretation of that information, and then provide some form of a intervention based on how I interpret that information. The beauty of what we're doing is we're actually using technology to do that interpretation. Once that interpretation is provided, we actually provide a standardized program. So there is no variation. We have a standardized program that, based on your movement assessment, is provided. So, you know, Bob and Joe and Steve in 3 different parts of the country who have the same movement scores and the same type of assessment, they're going to get a very similar standardized program based on their occupation. Because, you know, that's been part of the problem is that so many of these programs, number one, are too subjective. It's me interpreting what that means. And then it's my interpretation of that creates a program. By using the technology, the science, we're using the latest technology, the latest in sports science and research, and using all that information to provide a very standardized approach. The beauty of that is, if it doesn't work, we can constantly make adjustments to it. We can constantly make minor adjustments to it to see what those results changes are.
So we have the test. Once you perform the test, what does the member receive after that?
So they will actually download our app called My Rebound. Once they download the app, in the background, we have taken their results and plug that into the system. And the system will provide them with a periodization program that they will perform for the entire year. So the member will then, once they log into that app, they'll get an invite from us with a login. They'll log into there and they'll go into there and they'll see their exercise program. So this exercise program will have a video for everything that they will do for their program, have a video that will walk them step by step by step through the entire exercise program, and they'll have a video for every single week of their program. On the back side of that as well is Samantha, who is our certified athletic trainer. So if they're having problems with the program, they have questions about the program, they're having a hard time fitting it into their schedule, she will actually work with our members to help adjust the program and make it more amendable to what their schedules are, make it easier for them to be able to do, all while maintaining the integrity of the program itself.
How often do I want to do a follow-up on this?
For the movement assessment itself, we typically recommend that once a year. Our goal and part of what we're down here for this time is actually to train folks on doing the assessment. The idea with the department being able to do those assessments in-house, if they're doing them in-house, they do them as people are going into the academy, and then once again, probably when they come out of the academy, it takes about 12 weeks for you to actually see a change in the results. So you do the assessment, you do the exercise program, it takes a full 12 weeks. We don't typically do testing other than once a year because our periodization programs are built out for an entire year. So typically it's on an annual basis. So Steve, I want to say thank you. Thank you for everything that you've done for us out here. As part of Rebound, you're the one that brought our assessment down here. I know you've been super engaged in that. I know we're going through the training tomorrow. I'm excited. I have personally seen how this has changed the results with professional athletes, college athletes, and high school athletes. We've done this in the military with military personnel, but really this is our first big launching with first responders. And I just wanted to say thank you to you for bringing this to the market, bringing us out here to do this, because I truly believe this is going to help change the lives of our first responders. The beauty of this is that when we improve people's biomechanics, it means their joints last longer. What does that mean? That means less total hips, less total knees. That means when you retire, you can actually move around and not be painful. It means you can get on the floor with your grandkids. I've been in professional sports and sports for a long time, but being able to take that same thing and apply that to our first responders, that's where it really counts. And I want to thank you for bringing us out.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.